and we're going to explore our experiences with faith as honestly as we can, and as deeply as we can, and hopefully touch on some subjects or some experiences that aren't really spoken about. We aim not to shame or to be shaming. We aim not to judge. And we're not pretending we're experts. We are giving what we've experienced, really. So yeah, last week we looked at judgment again for a second time, and how it can constrict us, and also the ideas of how judgment and fear can limit us, especially when it comes to love. And I remember you sharing a practice as well, James, along those lines.
Right, yes, thanks for reminding me. I knew that we talked a bit about that last week, and it's about that practice of just whenever you see somebody in the street or see somebody, our natural reaction is to judge negatively, but to combat that or counteract it, what I find myself doing, or what I found is the most helpful thing to do, is just to wish good things, pray for them, not even out loud necessarily, usually without them knowing. In fact, I've found that's like that probably has the most impact in the way I perceive them. If I don't, if it's not sort of an overt thing, and it also it leaves them free to, it can be quite. I think in the past when I used to be in the practice of praying for people. And offering to pray for people, that can feel a little bit intrusive in some ways. So this way, it's just between you and God, and just giving that like a positive outward going feeling, I suppose. I hesitate to use the word vibes because I think it gets a bit overused and a bit trite. But yeah, effectively, you're wishing positivity on something.
Yeah. What did you mean by intrusive then? Were you talking about if you actually told them that you were praying for them, or
yes, or like offered prayer? So back when I was a regular churchgoer, one of the things that we would do, particularly at the end of services, or like just regularly as part of our weekly lives, would just be to offer to pray for people who we met or who'd come to talk to us or something like that, and to an extent that there was like an understanding there. If somebody's come to a place of worship or a place where prayer is a regular thing, then to offer prayer for somebody or with somebody is quite probably quite acceptable and quite what's the word? Yeah, and it doesn't come as a shock to people. But I think when you're out in the streets and you're with people in a public environment, people can feel a little bit intimidated. Some people love it. It just really, really depends on who you're talking to and where they're at in their heads and their faith on their journey, and the circumstances surrounding that. There's so many factors. And certainly there have been times in my life where somebody's offered to pray with me, and it's come across in a little bit of a too forceful way. I don't feel like I can say no because I don't want to offend them, and it's like I can see them wanting to pray for me is more about their own stuff rather than actually because they perceive me to be in a situation where I'm wanting prayer, or wanting someone to pray with me, I should say. So yes, it's a funny one. It's a funny one, praying with people, praying for people, praying, on people's behalf. In some respects, it feels weird. In other respects, it feels amazing, and I know that it can be an amazing thing, and you can see amazing things. But at the same time, I think I've kind of been turned off it a little bit in my current spiritual position. I don't know.
Yeah. I think I wonder whether this should be our theme for today, James, talking about
Yeah,
prayer
why
and
not?
why we do it and our
Mm.
experiences with it. It kind of links in. So there was we had a comment which was really lovely to hear. Really enjoyed it. Unfortunately, I don't know if it was taken off or what, but I wasn't able to then see it. I got the email saying I got a comment, but I wasn't able to then see it when I went into YouTube, so I wasn't able to respond. But it was lovely hearing about a healing experience that somebody had, this person had, and after watching something we mentioned last week, and yeah, talking about a physical healing experience, which was lovely to hear. And thank you for that person that shared it. And it gets me thinking, I guess, or it kind of pulls me to, I guess, to appreciate again the. I think I might be prone to look at the negatives or the traps we fall into, and it kind of opened me up to think, oh yeah, this is like, I do believe in, I'd say, a God that is moving, and a God of love that is healing, and I can't explain a lot of that and the reasons why some things are healed and not, and things, but it's like that there is this power and this moving that is happening, that I believe in, and that gives me a real kind of hopeful view of the future, but also view now that somehow love is moving in its way. And it reminded me of a it was a book that I was reading. It was a counselling book, but it was linking it to kind of more spiritual things, and the worldview they gave behind their practice, and how positive it was of yes, there is all this stuff that's wrong, and there is all this suffering and hurt and the judging and othering and oppressing that we get into, but that somehow in the midst of all that, love is having its way, and God is having his way. God's having the way in that. So I guess that kind of is in my mind as well, as you were talking about prayer. And I think you said the word free. It leaves it free. I don't know. I don't know if I picked up on that, or but there seemed like a wishing well almost, that let it be free for the other person, but also for how God wants to move in that person.
It's a really open prayer. You're just sort of praying, I pray they have a really good day. I pray they feel joy or love or peace today. And these things, like, you know, they're huge concepts, and to each person they mean ever so slightly different things, but we all kind of know what they are. We all kind of know that sensation, or maybe we don't. You know, there are some people who've never felt that before, and so praying for them, or praying for people you see in the street who you don't know, whose lives you have no idea about. You don't know what conversation or experience that they've just come from, or what conversation or experience they're going to, and how those things have impacted or will impact their lives. So praying for them in that very moment that you see them, it is probably the only time you'll ever meet them, and or not really meet them, because you're not meeting them. You know, you're just seeing them. It's just encountering. But in that moment, you've got that. There's a split second where you can judge them and believe that they're not as good as you, or worth less, or whatever, or you can choose not to, and you can choose to wish good on them, and to wish them well, and to wish happiness and peace and kindness on them. And in doing so, if at the very base level, if even if they're like my concept of God and faith is just all a complete farce, which I'm open to it possibly being. I don't, I hold everything fairly lightly nowadays. I just don't know. At the very very base level, I have not felt ill feelings towards a person, and that's got to be a good thing, because those ill feelings, those like feelings of judgment or resentment or envy or lust or anger or whatever it is that I might feel towards a person, that is quite sort of debasing or reduces them down to like a single attribute or a single facet of their being that may or may not be true. It's warped, it's twisted. I've magnified it in some way in my head to be malproportioned and a bit of a Frankenstein of what they truly are. Then by me not feeling those sorts of instincts towards them, at the very very least, it's good for me. so even if like you don't believe in anything, even if you don't have a faith, even if you don't have a concept of God or a concept of spirituality, it is good for you to feel good towards people. Because I was funnily, I was watching a comedian the other night, and that they're an atheist, and their concept of it was, I've only got one life to do this, so I want to do the best I possibly can. And if that's your approach, you want to do the best you possibly can, it is, what a waste of time to judge others. What a colossal waste of time and energy and effort and good feeling. And like, when you could be enjoying yourself, why, even like from a hedonistic point of view, why? So I like that, and that it kind of it's kind of like a nice little secret thing to do as well, because I work in retail at the moment, and so there's a lot of my time is spent, particularly when it's a bit quieter in the store, just standing around people watching, which I really enjoy. Not everybody's cup of tea, but I enjoy it. And people watching, you can fall into that habit of cursing people, or fall into the habit of blessing people. And I prefer to do the latter, because it at least makes me feel good. And then by virtue of that, has a knock-on effect on every other interaction I have for that day. So there's, I think, just on a, have you come across Pascal's wager?
Yeah.
So just on a Pascal's wager element of it, which I don't, I think, okay, yeah, it holds some value. It's worth doing. Why not?
Yeah. It reminds me, it reminds me of, what was I going to say? I was struck when, so I was going to, it didn't remind me at all, actually. It struck me that the way I wonder whether the way that it's good for you is because you're then stepping into a different story, or participating in a different story. And I kind of think, for me, most of the time when I'm judging, or when I'm making somebody a Frankenstein, or it's because I'm doing that to myself. So there's some part of me that I'm not accepting, or there's some part of me I'm not wishing well on, nothing in some way. And actually, if I can do it to somebody else, then I start participating in that story that we as humans are worthwhile, that we as humans are fundamentally beloved, and there is hope for us. Then it changes how I relate to myself. And I start relating to myself with more compassion and empathy and love. And also, I think it opens me up to seeing And you know, it could all be made up. You're quite right. But to seeing what I would say is this work of love happening,
Yeah.
and it can happen in me in relation to somebody else, or I can spot it in just the smallest things of them laughing, or you know, and I think that just we talked about stepping out of the world of fear or the world of I forget what you were saying.
Out of the house of fear into the house of love.
Yeah, into the house. That was it. And I think it is. That's what we're doing, and suddenly we're in that house and we're seeing love as well.
Looking out through different windows.
Yeah. So practices like that can be so powerful, I think, for ourselves, and for our well-being, because it touches something deep, I think.
Yeah, and I think I loved what you're saying. You know, when you're looking at somebody else and there's that the negative ill feeling, that sort of it's because you feel something in yourself that you're not happy about, or you don't like, or there's like fear there, or something, some discord or discomfort. And a really good friend of mine once told me that, and it's just the best phrasing for this is, what offends us reveals us. So whatever we're offended by reveals whatever offends us inside. You know, it's offensive to us that we hold, and that you know. So if you have a clash of personality, it might be because the thing that's in that person's personality that is grating on you is something that you're afraid of in yourself, or fearful is part of you. And I guess that on a like a, this feels like a real heady spiritual tangent I'm going to go on. Weird, it's fine, we're doing this.
We're allowed those.
Part of the course, right?
Yeah.
That, you know, that again, that kind of speaks of like a macro spirituality of like something greater. That if there's something in somebody else that offends you, because it's a reflection of something that's in you that reflects that offends you. Equally, if you're feeling love or goodwill towards another person, and that makes you feel good, there's this sort of like reciprocity to it. This sort of like this sense that we aren't alone, and we're not. We don't happen in isolation. So that if the reason that something that I perceive in somebody else might offend me, because I might have it myself, is a sense that we're both human, and we're both flawed, or we've both got the potential for flaw, and that is what scares us. Maybe there's on a deeper level was what's really is frightening about it, or what really is kind of helping us to go in that direction is the sense that that's something that we could fall into. That's a danger for us. That's a danger for all of us as humans. And I want to. And again, it comes back to that wanting to separate, wanting to distance yourself from the pain, or from the other, from the I suppose in some respects what we would see as unlovable. Wanting to separate ourselves from that.
Yeah, and that comes back to our own fear of being unlovable, I think.
Yeah.
You know, all that stuff that we're afraid of inside us is stuff probably in our past that wasn't accepted, or wasn't being able to be held, or was too much for people, or brought, I don't know, disappointment, or something. And that's the stuff that makes us feel unlovable. And then we separate ourselves off. We kind of alienate ourselves from all that.
Yeah.
From all of that, and we see it in other people, and then alienate ourselves, and because we're searching to be lovable.
Yeah. And we think that if we if we can isolate those sections of ourselves, again, like coming back to the kind of internal family systems side of way of looking at things, well worth looking up if you haven't looked it up already, but about separating off self or elements of yourself that are unacceptable, and going, okay, well, if I put it away over here somewhere, and then I'll be okay. But actually, what you're doing is creating a rift in yourself. What you're doing is causing, or not causing, but like perpetuating that pain, because that bit won't get better on its own. It needs to be loved. and what my understanding is that God takes all of us, and loves all of us, like the good, the bad, and the ugly. He loves all of us, and like as individuals, loves all of us as individuals, and that's where I guess, like when we started off, and we touched on healing very briefly at the beginning there, just the sense that real healing isn't just about being healed physically, but being healed spiritually, and being healed emotionally, and being healed on a much deeper level, and that actually the physical healing can be almost the most mundane, weirdly, of those, even though it's like if you ever behold it or ever see it, it's like a huge miracle. But actually, if that's the most sort of like, almost the one that has I say the least impact. I say that hesitantly, knowing that I haven't ever been in a position where physically I felt, I am extremely lacking. I've got all of my fingers, and I've still got all of my toes, and my body works as I want it to. So I recognise that for some people that might be really, really tough to hear. So yeah, again, it's why I hold things lightly, because I don't know.
My thoughts were along the same lines. I was thinking, I have this experience, and I think I experienced the healing. You can always look back. It was only a minor thing, but it meant a lot at the time for me. And you look back and you could explain it away, that it happened. My body would have got there eventually anyway. So it could have done. But what it meant for me was, at the time, was that God was interested and God loved me, and that emotional, spiritual impact was far bigger than the physical, because it made the day a bit easier. But there was this bit of me that was thinking, but hold on, what about those that cry out for healing and don't get it? And it's such a difficult one, especially when you've got 7 minutes left of a conversation.
Oh god, rambled on. Maybe a topic for next week.
Maybe next week. Maybe next week, because it is important. It's a real part of a lot of people's spiritual experiences. What I was kind of thinking of as well was the idea of the what's the phrase? I want to say wounded healer, but that's not the phrase, is it?
Wounded healer's right.
Is it wounded healer?
Wounded healer, yeah.
So this idea that all this, so we were talking about all this stuff that becomes unacceptable to us. And I think of it using Jung's term of the shadow. All that stuff that we end up with a shadow that kind of follows us around.
Yes.
But Jung has this idea, and I don't know if it's in internal family systems, but our shadow is also our most powerful parts of us. It's often where a lot of our power, or embracing our shadow, or they talk about eating the shadow, is then tapping into, I guess, possibilities that weren't there before. And we can think of it as all bad stuff, but actually it's, there's a lot of good. Our own power could be in there because we weren't allowed to express that growing up, or that was kind of cut down, or our own wishes and needs, or our anger and that energy from anger, or all of this. And yeah, so I was thinking how the healing of this emotional side, where we can then grow to love those parts of us that before we alienated ourselves from and pushed out, then that becomes the place where we're most powerful in the world, or where we can have the greatest impact.
Where we've suffered already, where we've got scars, or where we feel low. Interesting. I like that. And when you were saying that, I was thinking, but even before you'd mentioned it, I was like, oh yeah, definitely anger's in there for me. That's not allowed. That's not allowed. And it's something that I think even now, well, I say even now, especially still, is still an emotion I really struggle with. I really kind of have difficulty accessing, and I don't know what that is, and that's still work to be done. I suppose there's still, like, there's so much healing in every single one of us that can take place that we actually don't really have any idea about. we get little tiny glimpses of.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like we get little bits, and I think particularly us who've been through counselling courses, you kind of think, yeah, that was really powerful. I can face the world, and then you realise,
the same person.
No, not quite the same person, but
grown person.
But it's almost like you become more aware of all the stuff, don't you? I think one thing I've just touching on anger and these stories of healing and love, I think I've grown to see anger as this cry out that something matters, and usually something that isn't being mattered or isn't being valued does matter. And that's where I've come to accept it a little bit more. I still have that reaction of like, oh, I don't like it, go away. But then kind of leaning into it a bit more, sitting into it and trying to find out what's it telling me.
I like that. What's it telling us? And that idea of emotions being the dashboard of our lives, and whenever you're feeling an emotion, it's because there's a light coming on in your dashboard. Probably have a look at that. Just the windscreen wipers, it's all right.
Yes.
Hopefully it's
or we'll just put it into the garage and we'll get it dealt with, and then we'll be fine again. We won't have the emotions again. Great. So James, we've talked about we've kind of meandered a bit, I feel.
A little bit.
I like it. We talked about prayer and healing and the wounds we have, and those parts of us we separate, and anything standing out for you, James, as we end?
I think just that the bit I'm just thinking, I'm shying away from that a little bit, is the idea of like, there's so much more work to be done in me. There's so much more, like, it's barely begun. It's sort of like, there's a lot to happen, and a lot of, like, stuff that life is going to do, the people I meet are gonna help with, and that I can help with, and just the knowledge that I'm not. I have, like, again, like this, something you spoke about, like, I'm actually quite judgmental of myself, and that's why the not judging others is a big deal for me, because again, I judge myself quite harshly, and maybe that's an area that would be good to look at, or good to work on, not necessarily in these sessions, but certainly for me on a personal note. Yeah, to really like go with the honesty of the conversation. So yeah, yeah, I think probably judgment, not just of others, but of myself.
Okay. Yeah, that's really sticking for you. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love the honesty in that, James. And it felt, I really felt that and thought, yeah, James is being vulnerable now. But I love that because
Close up all of the walls again. That's fine.
Yeah, here comes the humor.
Always.
But also, like, it's so normal as well. Like that's where we're at, isn't it? Of so many of us are at, me included, of that place of judging ourselves and yeah, and how much that can trip us up, I guess, or kind of hold us down. And I was just reminded as you were talking about, I think it was something you said, that God accepts us how we are and God loves us how we are. And I think that's the beauty of the Christianity I love. Is of a God accepting us exactly how we are. Yeah, and love somehow moving in all of that, in all of the stuff we've got no idea about, and we've got loads of working. Somehow love is moving in us. Still. Yeah. But I would love to explore that with you more.
Absolutely.
Self-judgment.
That's definitely something we can pick up on next week. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you very much, James. As always, love it so much.
It's really good, isn't it? Yeah. So healthy. Such good stuff to do.
And anyone who wants to join us and share their story, we love it. Even we're Christians, but we hold it loosely, as James has pointed out a lot. Yeah, we just think this is such a powerful part of our experience, and want to be sharing that with you and going there. Great. So until next week, guys, take care, and I'll see you again next week, James.
Yeah, see you again soon.